Right, let's get the view of some local voters now. Mark Ponsonby is a bookkeeper and is supporting the Lib Dems. Felix Milton, a financial planner, supporting the Tories, and Nick Agnew, a filmmaker who is backing Labour. Mark, first of all, a big Lib Dem history or Liberal history here with Jeremy Thorpe, MP for a long time, Nick Harvey, MP for more than 20 years. Is it going to be Brexit, or is it Brexit at the moment that's causing the problems for the Lib Dems?
I believe it is. I've spoken to a couple of my customers today about Brexit, and they're both Brexit supporters, and they are both voting Tory. And I think in another life they might have been Labour or Liberal. So I think it is making quite an impact. Yeah. That's my view.
And I mean, what about Lib Dem leavers? What are they? Are there Lib Dem leavers? And if so, what are they?
I think there are some. They're pretty a small minority, I would say. But most Lib Dems want to stay in the Union, stay in the EU.
And you talk to a lot of people. I mean, is it the issue that is kind of dominating here?
I think it's the issue that's dominating, yes.
Felix, do you agree with that?
I think it is, yes. I think regardless of all the other noise, primarily in North Devon, people are viewing it as a Brexit election, really. So they're going to vote for the candidate. And where in North Devon we were overwhelmingly Leave, that should pick up more votes for the Conservatives. And with the Brexit Party standing down, it should go to their benefit and probably to the disadvantage of the Liberals.
Yes, that's interesting. I mean, Nick, so, I mean, Labour, it's quite interesting. We heard from the guy in the film there talking about all these other issues of public services. Yeah. And he's saying he's talking to more and more people who are talking less about Brexit, more about public services, more about the NHS and education.
I absolutely agree. I think that an interesting...
Welcome back to Barnstaple. Sorry about the power interruption. I don't know whether the political parties can make capital out of that, but we're back, and I'm talking to Mark Ponsonby, who's a bookkeeper and supporting the Lib Dems. Felix Milton is supporting the Tories. Nick Agnew, a filmmaker, backing Labour. And things are getting quite interesting because Mark had basically just said you don't think the Lib Dems will win this election.
And that's an honest appraisal. And I do think this election needs some honesty put into it, because why I'm Lib Dem more than anything is I find the other two parties have gone to either extreme. Labour's trying to put forward a socialist utopia, and the Conservatives, I really don't frankly trust them.
So is it just the Brexit thing, or is it something the Lib Dems have done that you think will play very difficultly for Lib Dems here?
Why I'm going for the Lib Dems is, as I said, I think the politics has gone to the extremes, and I want it back into the centre ground with some sensible discussion and argument on topics, rather than shouting at each other and just, frankly, being quite antisocial.
But if politics have gone to the extremes, why don't you think the Lib Dems will win here? I mean, this is not an extreme place at either end of the...
It isn't. I just think that Brexit has consumed it. And I just think it's going to be voted on Brexit more than anything. And I think the Conservatives will win here quite handsomely.
And was your leader right to say, revoke, we're scrapping Brexit?
Well, I think she probably was to get a position, but personally, because they do also talk about a second referendum, I'm a Liberal that's actually totally against a second referendum.
Are you?
Because the first one's such a disaster.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting position.
Yeah, I'm totally against.
But look, let's just move on. I mean, this point about, two parties here, Labour and Conservative, have moved to the extremes. I mean, defend yourselves. Are you extremist parties now?
But interestingly, I think you kind of highlight the reasons that Labour aren't moving to the extremes. Here in North Devon, the traditional wisdom says vote Liberal Democrats to keep the Tories out, but that's just not proving the case anymore. The support for the Liberal Democrats is being chipped away because there's no confidence in it.
It's the most left-wing government party for some time.
Since the introduction of the welfare state, since the introduction of the NHS, things that we hold incredibly dear.
And I think if that's going to be their downfall. I mean, you're taxing pensioners on £14,000 a year. They're going to make a lot more money on their dividends, a lot more tax, and suddenly
hang on a minute, you're talking about people who have money invested and squirreled away. We're talking about ordinary people. Some of the statistics that you mentioned at the top of this segment were quite striking. We're a constituency where the housing prices are relatively high and incomes are relatively low. So Labour are looking out for those kinds of people. So the idea that they're extreme views actually seems to be not true because they're cutting through.
The leader the other day, when he was asked directly if someone on £14,000 a year will end up paying more tax, he said yes. £14,000 isn't a big income, particularly for an area like North Devon. If you're on, say, the state pension, you've got modest savings, a modest portfolio.
£80,000 being and above being mainly
tax
hit.
changes, that will affect the lower earners as well. And I mean, in my job, the clients I see from this area in particular.
But are you worried as a Conservative that you've got Lib Dems now saying we're going to lose? That would change the dynamic, maybe. It may be quite
not in North Devon, no, not at all. I mean,
you think you're home and dry?
I think, especially with our demographics, we are a largely retired population, and if you're going to be taxed more on your modest investment portfolio, say that you've saved up your entire life, and things like that, your state pension, you want that to be guaranteed.
Can I just point out, this is really interesting that you're focusing on a very specific demographic of people.
Taxation, but in this area, that's a very big demographic.
I agree, there's a slightly older demographic, but you're talking about people with portfolios. But most people here in North Devon don't fulfil that remit. And in our neighbouring constituency, just over the water there, Labour went from third to second at the last election with the Liberal Democrat tactical voting in full swing.
So address the needs of Brexit's one thing. Well, they address the needs that he is talking about.
Definitely. They're not going to put taxes up for the elderly people in particular and everyone else in general, which is what a lot of people don't want to see. They pay a lot of tax now, and things like the hospital in North Devon, the Conservatives are pledging to completely refurbish that, and it will be one of the areas.
Oh, come on. I mean, I really thought we'd put that myth to bed.
I do think you're both talking about taxes. With all the pledges and promises from the two main parties, taxes will have to go up. Money just doesn't come out the ground.
No, it doesn't, which is why Labour's fully costed it.
So is this a one-off where you're saying we're not going to win this, the Tories are going to win this? Do you think people will revert after this Brexit election to
I do think it will change, because I think people are going to get sick of the extremes on both sides.
Do you mind if I ask then, if we're going back to the norm after the next election, now that we don't have a character like Nick Harvey standing for the Liberal Democrats here, I mean, you yourself admitted before you didn't even know the candidate's name here.
No.
So when Labour take a large portion of the vote here, why will it go back when we've got candidates who are unknown to the population here in North Devon?
Because I think people want a more central ground. They don't want to go to parties just promising the earth from one side and the other one just hoping this socialist utopia is going to come up. And
it's not much of a utopia. I mean,
what about Labour voters here voting tactically and supporting the Lib Dems?
Yeah, well, historically, that's been a thing that goes on regularly.
But would you suggest that Labour voters did that, or would you suggest
absolutely
they
not,
vote
because
on
it's not going to work here.
I mean, as a Conservative, if they wanted a Lib Dem, yes, absolutely Labour voters should vote Lib Dem here, because they don't have a chance. It's a Conservative Lib Dem race here, but primarily because Lib Dems are running on a Remain mandate.
But it's 12%. 12% of the votes in the last election were Labour votes.
Sure.
Yes, but how many were Conservative and Lib Dem? So 12% is quite a small proportion.
But the interesting thing is here in North Devon is I think, a large portion of people who vote for the Liberal Democrats are Labour supporters that say, well, we have to vote Liberal Democrat here, and that's because we've had characters like Nick Harvey here, and we've got the tradition of tactical voting, and that's
so what would your message be? I mean, there's 3 days to go. You're throwing in the towel. I mean, what would your message be then to Lib Dem voters here?
Well, go out and vote. Go out and vote Lib Dem. And I'd urge Labour followers and supporters to vote Lib Dem as well, without doubt.
But you're a Lib Dem who's not backing a second referendum.
No,
you don't want to. What is that? On what grounds would you say?
On the grounds that the first one has been such a disaster. We've had over 180 years of representative democracy. Why try this experiment of referendum on something so complex? I mean, do you understand the Northern Ireland situation? You need to be a professor to understand these things.
So basically, what's done is done.
If the Conservatives, I think they're going to romp it, get in, and they, as they say, deliver Brexit, and we have the next 10 years in turmoil, then I think that's better than a second referendum, because I think a second referendum will rip this country apart.
Right. Do you agree?
I want certainty of outcome as well. I mean, at this point, I think regardless, the general population don't really care anymore. They want Brexit out of the way, regardless of what that is. I think a second referendum, what if Leave wins again? What if it's 52-48 again? Do we have a third, a fourth, a fifth? Do we keep on with the uncertainty? I think certainty of outcome is what people generally want at this election.
So we've been talking about a Brexit election. What are the local issues you think people should be talking about that may make a difference but are not going to get a look in?
Broadband. Because with being a bookkeeper, I deal a lot with cloud-based accountancy, and there are people on Exmoor that cannot get. They are, in fairness, I'll give them that. but there are people in Exmoor that can't get an internet connection. So they're and they're business people.
Literally and psychologically cut off from Westminster. Is there a feeling here that...
Yes, absolutely, being left behind. I mean, our transport links are another one which are really, really poor here. I mean, I travel out of the constituency a lot, and trying to get the train anywhere is a disaster. I mean, it's a 2 or 3 carriage.
Is that a sort of cross-party agreement?
I mean, it was, but the current sitting Conservative MP managed to get extra £100 million for the A361, which is the main route in and out of North Devon. We're going to get some more lanes, but it's been promised by the government, and so that is a positive Conservative outcome for the constituency.
And it's not very green. I mean, improving, I agree that the road does need improvement, but what we need here is investment in public transport more than anything else. We're a constituency that's being held back by lack of investment and the lack of ability to bring enterprise and business down here, which the Conservative Party is supposed to stand for.
And what about I mean, are people interested in the election? Will there be a turnout because Brexit's at stake in many people's minds?
I think so. I think there'll be quite a good turnout at this election. I don't think people are going to be very apathetic towards it. They're going to come out and vote in their numbers because they're viewing it as a second Brexit referendum.
Especially the Conservatives people will come out.
But particularly young people as well. Certainly from Labour's perspective here in North Devon, the young vote.
Well, the young vote is so important because
it's so important. And the climate strikes that have been going on consistently here demonstrate that they're organised by young people and they care.
The poor young people, the housing is so bad because during the Blair years, young people didn't vote. So the government at the time thought, why interest these? Why do we need these people? Why should we build homes for them for the future? So that's why we've got a housing crisis, because they've been ignored.
So just final point, you wouldn't be looking at tactical voting then? I mean, this is an ideal opportunity for some Labour voters to join the Lib Dems, isn't it? I mean, to vote for Lib Dems this time, isn't it?
It's an ideal opportunity for them not to, because they've done it before and they've only had Conservative and Liberal Democrat MPs here. So it's about time we had some change.
Yeah. Well, look, thanks very much. I'm sorry about the loss of power, but there was plenty of energy in the conversation. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well, we'll be back with a little bit more from Barnstable coming up at the top of the hour.